The night was heavy with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel weighted. Streetlights buzzed faintly along the quiet stretch of road in Brookdale, a mid-sized southern town where whispers of injustice often carried louder than any siren. And that's when it happened. Red and blue lights flared in the rearview mirror. A sharp burst of the siren cut through the night air like a warning shot. "Pull over," came the bark through the cruiser's speaker. Angela Carter's hands tightened around the steering wheel. She was 36, professional, composed, and deeply respected in her community. But in that moment, none of that mattered. To those officers, she was just a black woman driving home late from work. Her car rolled to a stop at the curb. The engine ticked softly in the silence. Angela glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 10:42 p.m. She just finished grading law briefs from her students. Yes, students. Angela taught part-time at the university while serving as a sitting judge. Few people balanced as much responsibility as she did, and fewer still carried themselves with her quiet authority. But tonight, her title meant nothing. Two police officers stepped out of the cruiser. Their boots struck the pavement in sync, heavy and deliberate. They didn't approach with professional caution, but with the swagger of men who already believed they owned the situation. Officer Hashwan, tall, broad-shouldered, and pale, tapped the flashlight against his palm as he approached her driver's side. His partner, shorter but wiry, flanked the passenger side, resting his hand casually near his holster. Angela rolled down her window, calmly, slowly, the way every black parent in Brookdale taught their children. "Evening, officers," she said evenly, her voice steady. "Is there a problem?" The tall one leaned down, his breath reeking of stale coffee. His eyes flickered over her face, then down to the luxury sedan she drove. "License and registration," he said flatly. No explanation, no greeting. Angela kept her movements deliberate, narrating every step like she'd been trained to. "I'm reaching for my purse now. It's on the passenger seat." The shorter cop chuckled. "We know the drill, sweetheart. Just don't try anything cute." Angela's chest tightened, but her face betrayed nothing. She retrieved her license and registration, handed them over, and waited. The tall one studied the documents, then sneered. "Angela Carter. You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood." Her jaw clenched, but she kept her tone even. "I was driving home. I live 10 minutes from here." The wiry cop circled the car, shining his flashlight through the back seat like he expected to find contraband. "Looks like she's got money. Wonder where it comes from." Angela's patience frayed. She inhaled slowly through her nose, grounding herself. "Officers, I'd like to know why I was pulled over." That was the spark. The tall one leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Step out of the vehicle." Angela froze. She knew her rights. There had been no traffic violation, no probable cause. This was harassment, plain and simple. "I haven't been told the reason for this stop," she said firmly. The wiry cop tapped the hood of her car. "We don't have to explain ourselves to you." Angela's pulse quickened. The night air pressed heavy on her chest. She could feel the danger escalating with every passing second. And then, like a storm breaking, everything went wrong. The tall officer yanked open her door. "Out. Now." Angela's seatbelt tugged against her shoulder as she was pulled. Her body resisted, not in defiance, but in sheer disbelief that this was happening. "Officer, this is unlawful," she exclaimed. Her voice, usually calm and commanding in the courtroom, cracked with restrained outrage. The wiry cop grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back. Metal cuffs snapped cold against her skin. On the empty street, with only the hum of crickets and the flicker of streetlights as witnesses, Judge Angela Carter was arrested. Her mind reeled. She thought of her students, her colleagues, the countless defendants who had stood before her bench, looking to her for fairness. And now, here she was, reduced to nothing more than a body in custody, stripped of dignity by men drunk on authority. The tall one muttered as he shoved her toward the cruiser. "Another one who thinks she's better than the law." Angela's eyes burned, not with tears, but with fire. She bit down on her tongue, holding back the words that surged within her. They had no idea who she was. As the car door slammed behind her, locking her in darkness, one thought echoed louder than the sirens. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. The inside of the police cruiser smelled of sweat, old leather, and the faint metallic tang of handcuffs. Angela sat rigid, her wrists pressed awkwardly against the hard plastic seat. Every bump in the road jolted her, but she didn't flinch. Not once. She would not give them that satisfaction. The wiry cop, his nameplate read Miller, sat in the driver's seat, humming off-key to a country tune leaking faintly from the radio. His partner, Officer Daniels, leaned back with his arm resting across the divider, smirking at Angela like she was a prize they had caught. "Funny thing," Daniels said, twisting his flashlight in his hands. "Women like you always got an attitude. You think a smile and a title make you untouchable." Angela's eyes flicked toward him, her voice sharp but calm. "Your job is to uphold the law, not invent reasons to abuse it." Miller let out a short laugh. "Oh, we'll see about that." The cruiser pulled into the back lot of the Brookdale Police Department, its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The building was familiar to Angela. She walked these halls before, but always as a judge conducting oversight meetings, never as a detainee. That irony bit deep. They yanked her from the car. The night air carried the smell of asphalt and cut grass. Miller's grip on her arm was rough, unnecessary. "Careful," Angela snapped, pulling slightly against his hold. "That's excessive force." Daniels smirked. "Excessive force? Lady, you ain't seen excessive yet." Those words dug into her, and for the first time, a thin ripple of unease coursed through her chest. She knew stories. She knew names. Black men and women across the country who entered precincts like this one and never walked out the same way again. Inside, the station reeked of burnt coffee and stale paper. A bored-looking desk sergeant raised his brow as the two officers escorted Angela in. "What's this?" he asked. Daniels shoved her paperwork forward. "Suspicious behavior. Possible DUI." Angela's jaw dropped. "That's a lie. I wasn't drinking," Miller sneered. "We'll see what the test says." The sergeant sighed, already weary of the nonsense but too jaded to intervene. "Fine. Process her." As they walked Angela down the hallway, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing like angry wasps. They stopped at a holding cell, concrete walls, a steel bench, bars that smelled faintly of rust. Miller unlocked the door and shoved her inside. Angela caught her balance and turned sharply. Her dark eyes burned. "You two are making a grave mistake. I know my rights." Daniels chuckled, leaning casually against the bars. "You keep talking like you're somebody. Out there, maybe. But in here, you're just another perp." Angela drew herself up, even in handcuffs, her posture unshakable. "I am Judge Angela Carter of the Brookdale Superior Court, and I assure you, this will not end the way you think it will." For the first time, Miller hesitated, his brows knit together. "Judge?" Daniels laughed, slapping his partner's shoulder. "She's bluffing. If she was a judge, we'd know." Angela's voice was like steel. "Call my clerk. Call the mayor. Call the district attorney. They'll confirm exactly who I am." The officers exchanged a look. That flicker of doubt, the first crack in their armor, was brief, but Angela saw it. Still, Daniels doubled down, his pride too heavy to let go. "Nah, tonight, you're just a woman we picked up. Judge or not, you'll learn your place." Angela's chest rose and fell as she steadied her breath. She'd been underestimated her entire life, by classmates, by colleagues, by the justice system itself. This was nothing new, and yet it was everything. The cell door slammed shut with a clang that echoed down the hallway. Angela sat on the bench, her wrists throbbing against the cuffs. And as she sat there, she thought back to her childhood in Georgia, where her father used to tell her, "Baby girl, if you want to change the system, you gotta beat it at its own game." Back to her first year in law school, when a professor told her she didn't look like someone who belonged in a courtroom. Back to every moment she had been dismissed, underestimated, or silenced, only to rise again, louder, stronger, and more determined. This night was not the end of her story. It was another chapter in it. Hours passed. The humming of the fluorescent lights was relentless, gnawing at her patience. But Angela refused to show fatigue. Finally, footsteps echoed down the hall. The desk sergeant appeared, looking uneasy. "Angela Carter?" he asked, peering into the cell. She lifted her chin. "Yes." The sergeant swallowed, glancing between her and the arresting officers. "Ma'am, are you the Judge Carter?" Angela's eyes locked on Daniels and Miller. "Yes, I am." The sergeant's face paled. He fumbled with the keys. "Lord, Judge Carter, I didn't realize." Daniel stepped forward quickly, his voice sharp. "Don't listen to her. She's lying. She's trying to pull rank." But the sergeant had already unlocked the cell. His hands trembled slightly as he removed Angela's cuffs. I've seen you on the bench. I didn't recognize you at first. Ma'am, I'm so sorry." Angela rubbed her sore wrists, her gaze never leaving the two officers. "Oh, don't apologize to me. Apologize to the system you've just embarrassed." For the first time, Daniel's smirk faltered. Miller shifted uneasily, his confidence cracking. Angela stepped out of the cell, her posture regal despite the ordeal. She leaned close enough for the officers to hear her words, low and cutting. "You've made a mistake that will follow you into my courtroom. And when that day comes, gentlemen, I will be the one holding the gavel." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of realization. And though they tried to mask it, the fear had already taken root in their eyes. The courthouse buzzed like a hornet's nest that morning. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing as every whisper of scandal seemed to echo through the marble halls. Brookdale had never seen this kind of heat. Angela Carter, in a perfectly pressed navy suit, strode through the main doors with her chin lifted high. The arrest had bruised her wrists, but not her spirit. If anything, it had lit a fire that no amount of intimidation could extinguish. Her clerk, Tamika, rushed up beside her, clutching a stack of files. "Judge Carter, the docket is packed today, and the press." Angela held up a hand, calm and composed. "Let them watch. The truth needs an audience." Tamika nodded, her eyes wide with both admiration and worry. Everyone knew what was coming. Inside, the courtroom was already filled. Lawyers, defendants, community leaders, even off-duty officers sat scattered in the gallery. But all eyes turned as Angela took her seat behind the bench. The gavel rested before her like a weapon of justice. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Angela Carter." Every person in the room stood, even the two men who least wanted to. Officers Daniels and Miller shuffled in, dressed in their uniforms, arrogance still stitched into every crease. But beneath it, just beneath, Angela could see the cracks, the tension in their shoulders, the slight twitch in their jaws. They had expected to bury her that night. Instead, they were now standing trial, accused of unlawful arrest, abuse of power, and falsifying reports. The irony was almost poetic. Angela adjusted her glasses, her voice steady as she addressed the court. "You may be seated." The shuffle of chairs was loud, like a wave rolling across the room. She let the silence settle after, savoring the weight of the moment. "This court is now in session. The matter before us concerns the conduct of officers Daniels and Miller." Her gaze sharpened as it landed on them. "The same officers who placed me under arrest just 3 nights ago." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The press scribbled furiously, cameras clicking. Daniels straightened, forcing a smirk. "Your Honor, this seems like a conflict of interest. You can't preside over this case." Angela tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "On the contrary, I've been assigned by the State Judicial Board specifically to handle it. Transparency is essential. Wouldn't you agree?" Miller's face flushed red. Daniel's smirk faltered. Angela leaned forward slightly, her voice like steel. "Gentlemen, you thought that night would end differently, that I'd walk away quietly, humiliated. Instead, you stand here accountable to the very law you swore to uphold." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed black woman named Renee Jackson, rose. "Your Honor, the state will show that these officers engaged in racial profiling, unlawful detainment, and filed a false DUI claim against you with no evidence whatsoever. Furthermore, their misconduct is part of a larger pattern," Daniels whispered harshly to his lawyer, his composure unraveling. Miller stared at the table, jaw clenched. Angela tapped her gavel once. "Proceed." Renee called her first witness, Sergeant Thompson, the desk officer from that night. He shifted uncomfortably as he took the stand, clearly aware of the weight of his testimony. "Sergeant," Renee began, "did you recognize Judge Carter when she was brought in?" "At first, no," Thompson admitted, his voice low. "But once I realized who she was, I released her immediately." "And did you have any evidence that she had been drinking or driving under the influence?" "No, ma'am. None at all." Angela's eyes flickered briefly toward Daniels and Miller. Their faces tightened. The testimony continued. Statements from community members. Evidence from the traffic cameras showing Angela driving perfectly within the law. And even recordings from the station security cameras catching Daniels' mocking words. Piece by piece, the officer's story unraveled. But the real turning point came when Renee introduced Exhibit C, Daniels' body cam footage. The screen lit up, showing Angela's calm, measured voice narrating her movements. Then came Daniels' sneering remarks, Miller's mocking tone, and finally, the moment they yanked her from the car without cause. The jury, and the entire courtroom, watched in stunned silence. When the video ended, you could have heard a pin drop. Angela let the silence stretch before she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just about me. This is about what happens every day in towns like Brookdale. Black citizens pulled over, harassed, and humiliated, not because of what they've done, but because of who they are." Her voice resonated through the chamber, each word heavy with conviction. "Tonight, the tables have turned. Justice does not bow to arrogance, and the gavel does not discriminate." The gallery erupted in murmurs, some in outrage, others in awe. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every syllable. Daniels slammed his fist on the table. "This is a circus," he shouted. Angela's gavel cracked sharply. "Order." Her eyes bore into his. "Officer Daniels, in this courtroom, you answer to me." The weight of her authority silenced him. For the first time since that night, Angela felt the balance tilt. Not just for herself, but for every person who had been silenced by uniforms and badges. And yet, deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The trial would drag skeletons from closets, ignite outrage in the streets, and shake Brookdale's foundation to its core. But in this moment, this breathtaking reversal, the power was hers. The courthouse felt different that morning. It wasn't just another day on the docket. It was history unfolding. The marble steps outside were crowded with reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning, their voices rising in a chorus of questions that no one answered. Is it true she was arrested? Will she be presiding today? What does this mean for the department? Inside, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Lawyers shuffled papers nervously. Defendants waiting for their hearings sat stiffly, whispering to each other. And sprinkled among the crowd were community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens who had heard the story and wanted to see justice for themselves. Angela Carter walked through those doors like a storm contained in a soup. Her navy blazer was pressed to perfection, her hair smoothed back in a neat bun, and her stride carried the weight of every injustice she had ever endured. The bruises on her wrists, hidden beneath her sleeves, pulsed with each step, a reminder of why this moment mattered. "Judge Carter," a reporter called from the hallway, shoving a mic forward. "Do you have any comment on the allegations against Officers Daniels and Miller?" Angela didn't break stride. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. She wasn't here to talk to the press. Not yet. She was here to speak where it mattered most, inside that courtroom. Her clerk, Tamika, scurried to keep pace, arms full of case files. "Judge, the docket is overloaded, and the press. They're not going away." "Are you sure?" Angela stopped just outside the courtroom doors and turned to her. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with determination. Tamika, listen to me. They humiliated me in front of this town. But today, the truth gets the spotlight. Let them watch. The truth needs witnesses. Tamika swallowed hard, nodded, and opened the doors. The room fell into silence the moment Angela entered. She felt it wash over her. The stares, the whispers, the disbelief. A few in the gallery stood in respect before the bailiff even spoke. All rise for the Honorable Judge Angela Carter. Every single person rose to their feet, including the two men who least wanted to. Officers Daniels and Miller shuffled into the room with their attorneys, still wearing their uniforms. Their arrogance hadn't disappeared, but Angela could see it. It was thinner now, like a mask slipping at the edges. Daniels smirked, as if daring her to break. Miller's jaw clenched tight, his eyes darting everywhere but toward her bench. Angela took her seat. She lifted the gavel and let it rest before her like a blade waiting to strike. You may be seated. The shuffle of chairs filled the air. Then silence. This court is now in session. Today, we hear the matter of misconduct against officers Daniels and Miller, the same officers who unlawfully arrested me 3 nights ago. A ripple of gasps rolled through the gallery. Pens scratched furiously across notepads. The story was alive, unfolding in real time. Daniels rose, sneering. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. You can't preside over your own case. It's a conflict of interest. Angela adjusted her glasses, her expression cool and unshaken. The State Judicial Board has reviewed the matter and assigned me to preside. Transparency is vital, and rest assured, Officer Daniels, I am capable of impartiality. The evidence will speak louder than either of us. Miller shifted uncomfortably. Daniel sat down, his jaw tight. Angela nodded to the prosecutor, Renee Jackson, a sharp-eyed black woman who stood tall with confidence. Ms. Jackson, you may proceed. Renee stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. The state intends to prove that these officers engaged in racial profiling, unlawful detainment, and falsified charges of DUI against Judge Carter. Further, we will show that this misconduct is part of a larger pattern of abuse. The gallery murmured louder, the words pattern of abuse carrying weight. The first witness was called. Sergeant Thompson, the desk officer from the night of Angela's arrest. He looked uneasy as he took the stand, clearly aware of the storm his testimony could stir. Sergeant, Renee began. When Judge Carter was brought into the precinct, did the arresting officers provide any evidence she was driving under the influence? Thompson shifted, eyes dropping. No, ma'am. There was no evidence. Did you personally observe Judge Carter exhibiting any signs of intoxication? No, ma'am. She was calm, collected, professional. And when you realized who she was, Thompson exhaled slowly. I released her immediately. I recognized her as the presiding judge of the Brookdale Superior Court. Murmurs spread through the gallery like wildfire. The defense attorney shifted in his chair, scribbling notes furiously. Angela kept her face neutral, but inside, she felt the tide turning. Renee called her next witness. A technician who confirmed traffic camera footage showed Angela driving perfectly within the law. No swerving, no erratic speed, nothing to justify a stop. Then came the exhibit that silenced the room. Daniel's body cam footage. The lights dimmed as the screen lit up. There was Angela, speaking calmly, narrating her movements as she reached for her license. Her voice steady, professional. Then came Daniel's sneering words, Miller's mocking laughter. And finally, the moment they yanked her from the car without cause, cuffing her as she cried out, "This is unlawful." The footage ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. Even the defense attorneys looked rattled. Angela leaned forward slightly, her voice breaking the stillness. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is on that screen. This is not about me alone. This is about every black citizen in Brookdale who has faced humiliation, intimidation, and abuse of authority at the hands of those meant to protect them. Tonight, the tables have turned. Justice does not bow to arrogance, and the gavel does not discriminate. The words echoed through the chamber like thunder. Daniel slammed his fist against the table, rage boiling over. This is a circus. You can't do this. Angela's gavel cracked sharply. The sound cut through the chaos like lightning. Order. Officer Daniels, in this courtroom, you answer to me. The room erupted, not in noise, but in something heavier. Power had shifted. Completely. For the first time since that night, Angela wasn't the one being judged. She was the one delivering judgment. And everyone, Daniels, Miller, the gallery, the press, knew it. But Angela also knew this was only the beginning. The trial would dig deeper, uncover darker truths, and bring Brookdale's ugliest secrets into the light. Still, in that moment, she sat taller, stronger, and unshakable behind the bench. Justice wasn't just a word. It was alive, and it spoke through her. The courthouse had emptied by late afternoon, but the energy of the day still pulsed in its marble walls. Angela sat in her chambers, staring at the stacks of files that now seemed less like paperwork and more like weapons of truth. The trial wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a system creaking under the weight of its own corruption. Her clerk, Tamika, paced back and forth, biting her lip. Judge Carter. Angela. Today was huge. That footage? It's all over the news already. Social media is blowing up. People are marching outside the precinct. Angela leaned back in her chair, exhaustion tugging at the edges of her composure. I expected that. The people have waited too long for something to light a fire under this city. Now they've got it. Tamika stopped pacing. But you've also painted a target on your back. Daniels and Miller aren't just going to sit quiet while their reputations burn. Angela's eyes hardened. Let them come. I've been underestimated before. It only makes me stronger. Still, even as she said it, she couldn't ignore the gnawing tension in her chest. She'd received anonymous calls since the arrest. Heavy breathing, then silence before the line cut. She'd noticed a police cruiser parked across the street from her house late at night. Lights off, engine idling. Paranoia or not, the message was clear. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. Meanwhile, across town, Officers Daniels and Miller sat in the dimly lit back room of a bar where cops often gathered. The television above the counter replayed the courtroom footage on a loop. The words, "Justice does not bow to arrogance," scrolling across the screen. Angela's face, calm, commanding, glared down at them like a ghost they couldn't escape. Daniels slammed his glass on the table, beer sloshing over the edge. She's trying to ruin us. On camera, in front of the whole damn town. Miller rubbed his temples, his voice low. She already has. Did you see the looks in that room? Nobody believes us anymore. Daniels leaned forward, eyes blazing. We don't roll over. We fight back. We've got friends in high places. The chief, the union, the DA's office. They won't let her drag us through the mud. Miller hesitated. The chief's already distancing himself. He's not gonna risk his career for us. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we make it his problem. We leak something on her. Anything. Judges aren't saints. She's got skeletons. I promise you that. Everyone does. Miller's silence spoke volumes. Fear. Doubt. But Daniels was already plotting, the bitterness in his gut twisting into resolve. Back in her chambers, Angela met with Renee Jackson, the prosecutor. Renee's eyes sparkled with determination as she spread out files across the desk. We're getting calls from people in the community, Renee said. Not just about your case, but about Daniels and Miller. Citizens are lining up with complaints, racial profiling, harassment, excessive force. Some were too afraid to come forward before, but now, Angela leaned in, scanning the papers. Now they see cracks in the shield. Renee nodded. Exactly. And if we can establish a pattern of misconduct, this trial becomes more than just your word against theirs. It becomes a referendum on the way this department treats Black citizens. Angela exhaled, both heavy and hopeful. That's what terrifies them most. Exposure. Renee smirked. And exposure is exactly what we'll give them. Tamika poked her head in, her voice urgent. Judge, you should see this. She switched on the television in the corner. The local news showed live footage. A crowd of nearly 200 gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for all." And no one is above the law. The chants carried through the broadcast. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Angela's throat tightened. She wasn't one to get emotional easily, but seeing her community rally with such passion was overwhelming. "They're not just marching for me," Angela whispered. "They're marching for themselves. For every stop, every humiliation, every bruise the system has left." Renee placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And that's why we can't let them down." The next morning, the defense entered the courtroom with a new strategy. Daniels and Miller's attorney, a sharp-suited man with salt and pepper hair named Richard Caldwell, stood tall, oozing confidence. "Your Honor," Caldwell began, "the defense intends to prove that this case is not about justice, but about revenge. Judge Carter is using her position to settle a personal score. We have reason to believe her past decisions on the bench show a bias against law enforcement." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Daniels smirked, finally seeing his side land a blow. Angela didn't flinch. "Mr. Caldwell, unless you have concrete evidence, I suggest you tread carefully. Accusations without proof carry no weight here." Caldwell smiled coolly. "Oh, we'll present evidence. Subpoenas have already been filed for records of your past rulings." Angela tapped her gavel lightly. "Proceed within the law, Mr. Caldwell. Unlike your clients, I expect you to respect it." The tension was palpable, thick enough to slice. That evening, Angela returned home to find a small crowd waiting outside her front gate. Neighbors, church members, former students, all gathered, holding candles. A young girl stepped forward, maybe 12 years old, clutching a handwritten sign. "We believe in you, Judge Carter." Angela knelt to her level, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." The girl's mother spoke up. "We just wanted you to see. We're with you. You're not standing alone." Angela looked out at the sea of faces, the soft glow of candles lighting up the night. For a moment, the fear and exhaustion lifted, replaced by a powerful truth. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for all of them. But across town, in that same smoky bar, Daniels was on the phone, his voice low and venomous. "She's not untouchable," he hissed into the receiver. "Dig into her past. Find something, anything. If we can't win in court, we'll win in the court of public opinion." When he hung up, Miller looked uneasy. "Daniels, what if we push too far? What if this blows back on us?" Daniels' eyes burned with rage. "Then we take her down before she takes us down." The lines had been drawn. The fight was no longer just legal, it was personal. The air inside the courtroom that morning felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Reporters packed every seat in the gallery, cameras clicking furiously before the bailiff barked for silence. Protesters outside could be faintly heard through the glass windows, their chants pounding like a drumbeat. No justice, no peace. Angela Carter sat straighter than ever on the bench, her black robe pristine, her expression unreadable. She knew the eyes of the town, no, the entire country, were fixed on her. This trial was no longer a local scandal. It had become a national story about race, power, and accountability. Daniels and Miller sat at the defense table, their uniforms replaced with press suits, but no amount of tailoring could hide the anger etched into their faces. They whispered furiously with their attorney, Richard Caldwell, who seemed smug, almost gleeful. He believed today was the day he'd turn the tide. The bailiff called the court to order. Caldwell rose with theatrical confidence, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you will see the truth. The prosecution wants you to believe this case is about racial injustice and misconduct. But this is not about justice. It's about vengeance. Judge Carter has a history of rulings against law enforcement, rulings that show a clear bias. My clients were doing their jobs, nothing more." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Angela's jaw tightened, but her face remained composed. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Renee Jackson, the prosecutor, rose calmly. "Bias, Mr. Caldwell? Or accountability? Because there's a difference. And today, the evidence will show which side of the line your clients stand on." Angela gave a curt nod. Proceed. The defense called its first witness, a former defendant who had once faced sentencing in Angela's courtroom. He claimed she had been too harsh, that she had shown no leniency towards someone just trying to turn his life around. Caldwell pressed the narrative. Angela was vindictive, biased, and unfair to those in uniform. But Renee dismantled the testimony with cold precision. "Sir, isn't it true you were arrested for assaulting your wife in front of your children?" The man stammered. That's not the point." Renee's voice cut sharp. "It's exactly the point. Judge Carter wasn't biased. She was protecting victims. Your sentence was within state guidelines, and your appeal was denied twice." The gallery murmured in approval. The man shrank under the weight of the truth. Caldwell's smile faded. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Renee introduced new evidence. Exhibit H. She wheeled in a television cart, the screen flickering to life. Daniels shifted nervously. Miller swallowed hard. "This," Renee announced, "is audio recovered from the precinct break room the night of Judge Carter's arrest." Officers Daniels and Miller were overheard discussing the incident. The tape crackled. At first, background chatter. Then, clear as day, Daniels' voice, dripping with contempt. She thought she could talk back. "Didn't matter, she's a judge. Tonight, she's just another black woman with an attitude." Laughter followed. Miller's voice chimed in. "Bet she won't forget who runs this town." The courtroom froze. The words hung in the air. Heavy, damning, undeniable. Angela gripped her gavel but didn't strike it. The silence itself was louder than any sound she could make. Reporters scribbled like mad. Community members in the gallery shook their heads, some in tears, others glaring daggers at the two officers. Caldwell scrambled to object. This could be taken out of context." Renee cut him off, voice booming with righteous fury. "Context? The context is right there. These officers didn't just abuse their power, they reveled in it. They mocked their victim. They mocked this court. They mocked the very system they swore to serve." She turned to the jury, eyes blazing. "And if they can do it to a judge, imagine what they've done to ordinary citizens with no platform, no voice, no cameras to protect them." The gallery erupted with applause before Angela's gavel cracked. Order. Order in the court. But even she couldn't mask the tremor of emotion in her voice. The truth was no longer buried. It was standing naked before the world. Daniels, red-faced and trembling, leapt to his feet. "This is a witch hunt. She set us up. This whole town's against us." Angela fixed him with a stare that could cut through stone. "Sit down, Officer Daniels. In this courtroom, you do not dictate the rules. You answer to them." He froze, defiance quaking in his eyes. But he sat. For the first time, his bravado looked fragile. Miller hunched low, silent, as though wishing the ground would swallow him whole. Renee rested her case with a final, devastating blow. Sworn statements from 6 community members, each detailing incidents of harassment by Daniels and Miller. Black men pulled over for no reason. Black women searched and humiliated on sidewalks. Teenagers threatened with arrest just for walking home late. The pattern was undeniable. The jury's faces told the story. Shock, anger, recognition. They weren't just weighing evidence. They were reckoning with truth. Angela looked out across the sea of faces. Her voice, when it came, was measured but powerful. This court has heard testimony, seen evidence, and now uncovered undeniable proof of misconduct. Officers Daniels and Miller abused their badges, violated the trust of this community, and disgraced the oath they swore. Her words fell like hammers. You believed your power made you untouchable, but justice is not blind to arrogance. And today, justice has eyes wide open. The gallery rose to its feet, applause and cheers breaking through the veneer of courtroom decorum. Angela struck her gavel, but even she allowed a small smile. The climax had arrived. The tables had turned completely. And Daniels and Miller? They weren't just defendants anymore. They were symbols of a system finally being held accountable. The gavel strike echoed in Angela's mind long after the courtroom had emptied. Even with the applause, Even with the flood of voices cheering outside, she felt the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her chest. Justice had spoken, yes, but the echo of Daniel's words, just another black woman with an attitude, still stung like a fresh wound. Angela sat alone in her chambers, robe draped across the chair beside her, hair slightly undone from the long day. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to exhale. Her hands trembled as she reached for the glass of water on her desk. The trial wasn't over, not legally, but the tide had shifted. There was a knock. Tamika stepped in, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and exhaustion. "Judge, you need to see this." She held up her phone. On the screen was a live stream of the courthouse steps. A massive crowd had gathered, students, elders, pastors, activists, families with children sitting on their shoulders. Signs waved in the air. Justice for Angela. Justice for us all. Cops must be accountable. No more silence. A pastor at the mic was leading a prayer. His voice thundered with passion. Today we saw that truth cannot be buried, that dignity cannot be stolen, that justice belongs to the people. Angela's throat tightened. She blinked rapidly, trying to push back tears. "They're not just standing for me," she whispered. "They're standing for every single person who's ever been silenced." Tamika smiled softly. "And you gave them the courage to speak." Meanwhile, in a cramped police union office across town, Daniels paced furiously. His suit jacket was tossed carelessly on a chair, his tie half loosened. Miller sat slumped in the corner, staring at the floor. "This is a damn witch hunt," Daniels snapped, slamming his fist against the desk. "She twisted everything, made us look like villains." Miller didn't respond. The union rep, a stocky man with thinning hair, sighed heavily. "It's not just her, Daniels. It's the evidence. That tape." Daniels spun, pointing a finger. "That tape never should have been admitted. They're railroading us. What about all the arrests we made, the criminals we put away? None of that matters now?" The rep spread his hands helplessly. "The board's distancing themselves. The chief won't touch this." Public opinions turned. Daniel's face flushed crimson. "So what? You're just gonna let them crucify us?" The rep leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, the best you can do is pray for a deal. Reduce charges. Quiet retirement." Daniel's fist clenched. "I don't retire. I win. You hear me? I win." But Miller, still hunched, whispered the truth neither wanted to admit. "We've already lost." The next day, Angela walked into the courthouse not just as a judge, but as a symbol. Protesters cheered when she arrived, some reaching out to touch her hand, others chanting her name. For a woman who had spent her career keeping her personal life quiet and controlled, the outpouring of love was overwhelming. Inside, Renee caught her in the hallway. "We've got jurors nodding our way, Angela. The evidence sealed it. It's only a matter of time before the verdict." Angela nodded, but her eyes were shadowed. "And when the verdict comes, the city's not going to stay calm. People will celebrate, yes, but others will fight back." Renee tilted her head. "You mean the department?" Angela's jaw tightened. "I mean the ones who've spent their lives believing they're untouchable. They don't surrender quietly." Sure enough, by mid-afternoon, the backlash began. Local talk radio was buzzing with angry callers, some defending the officers, others lashing out at Angela. "She's biased. She's making it racial." One voice spat. "Cops can't do their jobs anymore without being crucified." But on another station, a black mother called in, her voice trembling with emotion. "I tell my son every time he leaves the house, keep your hands on the wheel. Don't talk back. Don't move too fast. I've lived in fear for years. And today, Judge Carter gave me hope." The divide was clear. The trial had ripped open wounds that had been festering under the surface of Brookdale for decades. That evening, Angela attended a town hall meeting at the community center. The room was overflowing, folding chairs lining the walls, people standing shoulder to shoulder. An older woman stood, voice quivering but strong. "Judge Carter, we've prayed for someone like you, someone to hold them accountable. But how do we know this isn't just one case? How do we know real change will come?" Angela stood at the podium, scanning the room full of anxious, hopeful faces. She chose her words carefully. "Change doesn't happen in one verdict," she said. "It happens when a community refuses to stay silent, when citizens demand accountability every single day. This trial may be about me, but the fight is about all of us." Applause thundered through the hall. Some cried openly. A teenage boy in the back shouted, "We got your back, Judge," and the whole room roared in agreement. Angela's chest swelled with pride and responsibility. Back in his apartment, Daniel scrolled through news coverage on his phone, rage boiling with every headline. Corrupt cops exposed. Judge Carter stands tall. Pattern of abuse unveiled. He hurled the phone against the wall, shards scattering across the floor. Miller, sitting quietly at the table, finally spoke. "It's over, Daniels. They're gonna convict us." Daniels turned slowly, his face twisted in fury. "No, not if I burn this whole town down first." Miller recoiled at the venom in his partner's voice. For the first time, he looked at Daniels not as a brother in arms, but as a dangerous man spiraling out of control. That night, Angela sat by her bedroom window, watching the glow of candlelight vigils outside. People had gathered on her street, holding signs and singing hymns. She could hear the soft hum of "We Shall Overcome" carried on the summer breeze. Her phone buzzed. A text from Renee. "We're close. Be ready." Angela closed her eyes, hands folded in her lap. She thought of her father, who used to tell her, "The law isn't just ink on paper, baby girl. It's a mirror. And someday, you'll make it reflect the truth." She whispered into the night air, "Daddy, I hope I'm making you proud." For the first time in days, a tear slipped down her cheek. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming mix of pain and hope that had carried her to this moment. Tomorrow, the verdict would come. Tomorrow, Brookdale would face itself in the mirror. And tomorrow, Angela Carter would be ready. The courthouse buzzed like a hive. Reporters crowded the steps. Cameras pointed at the entrance. Microphones ready to capture history. Inside, the jury deliberated, locked away with transcripts and evidence that had already gripped an entire city. Angela sat in her chambers, the weight of waiting pressing on her shoulders. Judges weren't supposed to pace, but today she couldn't sit still. She moved from window to desk, back to window, like a caged bird measuring the bars. Tamika finally broke the silence. "You faced tougher rooms than this." Angela smirked faintly. "Maybe, but never one with this much at stake. This isn't just about two officers. It's about whether this community believes change is possible." Tamika crossed her arms. "And if the jury doesn't convict?" Angela paused at the window, watching the mass of protesters outside. Then the streets will. In the jury room, 12 men and women sat around a long oak table. The tension was thick, each person carrying the weight of the city's expectations. A middle-aged black teacher spoke first, her voice steady. "The tape says it all. Those officers weren't doing their jobs. They were abusing their power." A white man in his 40s, a local shop owner, frowned. "But conviction means prison. Are we ready to send police officers behind bars? What message does that send?" An elderly Latina woman leaned forward. "It sends the message that the law applies to everyone. No exceptions." They debated fiercely, voices rising and falling. Fear battled with truth. Tradition wrestled with justice. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Meanwhile, across town, Renee Jackson sat in her office, poring over case files that now seemed like trophies of survival. Each one represented a citizen who had dared to speak against Daniels and Miller. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "So proud of you. Daddy would be too." Renee leaned back, closing her eyes. For years, she had carried the burden of being the only one, the only black prosecutor in the room, the only one expected to be flawless. And now, she had helped pull the truth into the light. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "If you're the only one in the room, make sure you're the loudest voice for justice." Today, she had been at the community center. Volunteers organized care packages for families who had come forward to testify. The room buzzed with energy. as if the trial had awakened something long dormant. A young man taped up boxes, his face lit with determination. I used to think speaking out didn't matter, that they'd never listen. But Judge Carter, she made them listen. An older man nodded. It's not just about her. It's about us finally believing our voices carry weight. For the first time in years, Brookdale felt alive with possibility. But not everyone shared that hope. In a darkened bar, Daniel sat nursing a whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. Miller sat across from him, silent as ever. They're not just trying to convict us, Daniels growled. They're trying to erase us, to make an example out of us. Miller finally looked up, his voice low. Maybe we deserve it. Daniel's head snapped toward him. Don't start with that weak crap. We were doing our jobs. They just didn't like the way we did them. Miller's voice wavered. Jobs don't include humiliating people. Jobs don't include laughing about it after. Daniel slammed his glass down, shards flying. You think you're better than me? You were right there, every step of the way. Don't forget that. For the first time, Miller didn't flinch, and for the first time, I regret it. Silence thickened between them. For the first time, the bond they had built on shared power and arrogance began to crack. The next morning, Angela returned to the courthouse. As she walked through the crowd, hands reached out, voices called her name. Children waved signs. Elders whispered prayers. One young woman, clutching a baby on her hip, called out, Judge Carter, because of you, I'm not afraid to raise my son here anymore. Angela paused, smiling warmly. Don't thank me. Thank yourselves. You're the ones who stood up. She stepped inside, her robe flowing behind her like armor. Hours dragged by. The jury deliberated through lunch into the afternoon. Reporters speculated wildly. Would the jury convict? Would fear sway them? In her chambers, Angela reviewed her notes. She thought of every student she'd taught as a professor, every client she defended as a lawyer, every ruling she'd handed down as a judge. All of it had led here. Her father's voice came again. The law is a mirror. Don't be afraid of what it shows you, she whispered. I'm not afraid. Finally, the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. Angela moved into the courtroom, every step deliberate, every breath heavy. The gallery was packed, the energy electric. The bailiff announced, all rise. The jury filed in, solemn and silent. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman with calm eyes, stood. We, the jury, in the case of the state versus officers Daniels and Miller, the room held its breath, have reached a verdict. Outside, the crowd swelled, chants echoing into the sky. People clutched one another's hands, eyes fixed on the courthouse doors. Inside, Daniel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched beneath the table. Miller's shoulders sagged, as though bracing for impact. Angela sat tall, her face unreadable, though her heart thundered in her chest. The foreperson continued, her voice steady. For the charge of misconduct in office. Guilty. Gasps filled the room. For the charge of assault under color of law. Guilty. Daniel's face twisted with rage. Miller closed his eyes. And for the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights. Guilty. The gallery erupted. Applause. Cheers. Tears streaming down faces. The sound of centuries of silence breaking in a single roar. Angela struck her gavel. Order. But even she allowed the faintest smile. Justice had spoken. The courtroom had emptied. But the echoes remained. Applause. Gasps. The sound of chains as Daniels and Miller were led away in handcuffs. For Angela, the silence afterward was almost deafening. She sat at her bench, her robe still draped around her shoulders, staring at the empty jury box. This was history, and she had lived it. But in her heart, Angela knew this moment was bigger than a single verdict, bigger than her. Outside, the streets pulsed with life. Crowds sang, danced, and wept in one another's arms. It was as though Brookdale had been holding its breath for decades, and now, finally, exhaled. Renee stepped onto the courthouse steps, microphones shoved toward her. Her voice rang out, steady and proud. Today's verdict is not just about two officers. It's about a system that for too long has excused abuse. It's about a community that said, no more. And it's about the courage of Judge Carter, who showed us that no one is above the law. The crowd roared, chants of justice, 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 shaking the concrete. Angela watched from an upstairs window, her heart swelling. Yet even in triumph, her mind whispered, this is one battle. The war continues.